Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to Wasteland Talks, my talk show where we talk about whatever the hell we want. And this week, we're going to talk about some music. And I got Alex and Jim back after having them on with some of my Welcome to the Wasteland episodes, music related. Now, there's not a movie involved. It's just we're going to talk about an album. And the album we're going to talk about is the debut album of the supergroup Audioslave called Audioslave. And just to give a little bit of some background that I looked up. So more or less, basically the members of this band are three members of Rage Against the Machine and then Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. And I did look up some of like the reception to this album coming out. Cause like, I know like we could each share a little bit of like maybe how we first came to this album. Like I definitely know I heard some of these songs on MMR for the first time from Philly. For the Philly area, listening to 93.3 WMMR, everything that rocks.
Good station.
So, right. Yeah. So basically, they play a lot of Chris Cornell related music. I can't remember what the cover was, but I heard the same cover. Oh, it was Chris Cornell's cover of Patience. I think I heard that like 5 times in 2 weeks, and I'm just like,
that's right.
Why are they playing this so much? But anyway, some of the things that I saw, like critical reception, I think it was generally positive, but I think some of the response was like, well, this kind of just, it sounds like a mashup of, Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine. It has a more like a classic hard rock kind of sound mixed with alternative music that both of the bands played. And some of them, I think some of the receptions, like I saw one of them was just like, this just sounds like your standard produced hard rock album from whenever. And they mentioned that their second album, they kind of came up with more of their own voice as a band versus this one. But like, I'm going to let both of you kind of give some of your general thoughts. So like, Alex, kind of how did you come about the album and what are some of your general feelings about the album?
Well, everybody heard Like a Stone and Cochise. I remember hearing those songs when they came out. And so the funny thing is, like some of those criticisms you're talking about, I mean, I felt similarly. I knew right away back in the day that Like a Stone was like, wow, what a hook, what a voice, what a vibe. That song, I remember the video for it too. And I think they were in the desert and like that. But Cochise, I was like, oh, this sounds like, like a little bit of a Led Zeppelin ripoff, when I first heard it. Coming back to the album, like, so, I had only, we talked about it on the show. I think it was the Drive episode when Jim had brought up Shadow on the Sun, when we were talking about LA in Collateral, because these LA movies, some of the way these directors shoot LA, and when in that scene, so Shadow of the Sun in Collateral is what brought me back to the band, that song. And I'll admit, I think I just listened to Shadow of the Sun over and over and over and over again, and maybe listened to a couple songs here and there, But, now that I've listened to the whole album in context, I understand some of the criticisms, but honestly, my impression is Chris Cornell, this is like I haven't listened to enough Soundgarden, and I haven't listened to what came after this for Audioslave, but this is just a great work of art. Just from a vocalist, lyricist standpoint, I just think it's incredible what he's expressing on this album. I'll talk more about that, but just such an incredible performance all the way through, and that's kind of how I got back through it. And I'm just glad that you guys, this kind of forced me to really delve into the entire album.
Awesome. How about you,
Jim? I should have grabbed the notebook. That's my bad. So sorry if I'm all over the place. Lyrically, to me, I felt like Cornell was doing kind of more of the same as what he'd been doing with Soundgarden. Musically, also kind of more of the same from the musical side of Rage Against the Machine, because obviously Zach was like highly political. Not that these guys were not, and they weren't with the message, but like that wasn't. I don't feel like that's what drove them. I feel like the music is what were driving them, right? As to the sound, I did a little extra research this week. So I didn't know Rick Rubin produced it at the time. I probably didn't know who Rick Rubin was. He keeps popping up everywhere. It seems like Beastie Boys and Eminem and all these other places. Like Rick Rubin was all over the 90s and the 2000s, right?
Everywhere.
So to me, I think that's where the sound came in. But I mean, I think it sounds really good from beginning to end. There's only a couple of tracks that I would have tossed towards the end. I do know that I came to the album through the radio. It was either Cochise or Show Me How to Live. I don't remember which one. Probably Cochise. But I loved the sound. I loved the band. At the time, the only thing I wanted to hear more of was, like, for example, the riff-based rock. I loved it. Like the strong snare drum, like the strong 2 and the 4 beat, and kind of a classic rock structure. It's my thing. It's right up my alley. Chris Cornell, I loved him in Soundgarden, but the only album I think I owned was A-Sides. So I was only kind of familiar with the hits of Soundgarden.
Yeah.
I was only familiar with the hits of Rage, and their politics scared me a little bit. Like, Morello had "Arm the Homeless" written on his guitar when he was in Rage Against the Machine. And that was, to me, always was like, whoa, man, you know what I mean? Like they were very, very far left. And so their politics scared me away from the music a little bit back then. But Audioslave kind of was something that brought me back to both of those bands individually. And even like last week, my roommate was listening to the first or the second Soundgarden albums. And I was like, wow, Chris Cornell sounds so good. And he was probably like 19 or 20 years old. It's worth going back just to hear the difference in his voice. Because he was what, pushing 40? He was like 35 to 40 when this album came out, Audioslave. So it's also interesting hearing the themes that he's been working on, because he always was a little bit morose. I think he's a guy that was dealing with depression, dealing with some darkness. He had some demons, right? That's no secret. But the lyrics on this album definitely bear a little bit of discussion for that reason, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
I guess just to give a little bit of perspective on, like, I grew up until probably almost college, mostly just listening to like 60s, 70s, and 80s music. So like it was funny because the only modern music that I listened to is what my mom listened to, because my mom was more hip than me in terms of music. So
That's
like
hilarious.
Well, it's funny because like we drove around in her truck and like the CDs in it were Mad Season by Matchbox 20, Supernatural by Santana, and Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers. So like I didn't listen to a whole lot of stuff post 80s and especially post 70s, because like that was my kind of thing. I love classic rock music. But then I slowly started listening to a little bit more like metal music, some harder stuff. I've never really gotten into Rage Against the Machine. So like I've probably only heard a couple of their songs, to be honest. But especially when I moved away from like, it's funny, I was talking to Jim last night, like talking about like radio stations and influencing that kind of stuff, because I was always a 1029 WMGK kind of kid, which was all classic rock music. And that stopped at the 80s. And when I started listening to MMR more and 94.1, when that was a rock station and not a sports station, I heard more of like grunge. So like I heard like Pearl Jam and STP and like Soundgarden from that time. I definitely know a lot more Soundgarden than Rage Against the Machine, because I did at one point have their greatest hit CDs and stuff like that. I had a huge CD collection at one point. It was so many greatest hits albums from so many different kinds of things. Prince and Record Exchange, cheap music.
For me, it was BMG. I think BMG Music Club. That was my biggest vice as a teenager.
There you go. Mm-hmm. I think and when it came to, I remember when we agreed on this album and I started listening to it through, I'm like, I've heard so many of these songs before, but like never really put together, like this was all from the same album, which is really interesting. And, you know, I think the sound I love, because like it is like has that classic rock kind of sound to it, mixed with, you know, it has tinges of like you could hear a little bit of like that Tom Morello kind of uniqueness with how he plays his guitar and the kinds of things, because like obviously he does all kinds of crazy stuff in like Rage Against the Machine, and like you can't not listen to a band with Chris Cornell in it and not be like, well, that's obviously Chris Cornell. One thing that I found so interesting is that this is almost a whole band just with a lead singer change, and
True.
It's interesting that how big of a difference that can make. Because like the example that I always think about is like Creed. Because you take out Scott Stapp and replace him with Miles Kennedy, you get Alter Bridge. And I love Alter Bridge. And not that I don't like Creed. I probably like Creed more than most people. But the thing is, it's like, it's a whole other kind of animal. And like, I became such a huge fan in college of like Alter Bridge. But like, and it was 100% because of pro wrestling. And Alex can appreciate this because of Edge.
That song is amazing.
Metalingus.
What's the name of the song?
Metalingus.
Do you know that song, Metalingus, Jim?
I'm familiar with, like, if I heard it in a lineup, I'd be able to pick it out.
On this day, I see clearly. It's just like, go run really fast while you're listening to that song.
That's how I felt about a lot of Audioslave songs.
Yeah.
I would listen to Audioslave on the way to my hockey games to get like jazz, to get my energy up for hockey games. That was how I used Audioslave for that first.
There you go.
I remember, I think the first time I really listened to Audioslave was because my brother Ethan's a fan of Audioslave. It was like, I remember him listening to this, and it's so interesting because, you know, you have those songs that get played to hell on the radio, and eventually people like turn away from them. It's like, oh, I can't listen to this anymore. But like listening to Like a Stone, it's like, it has such a distinct, like this strange, somber kind of intro to it that's different. Like it definitely opens very differently from like the other, 5 tracks that come before it on this album. And you're just like, oh, and it's just like something different. And
yeah, absolutely.
Alex gets what reference that I made there.
Can we do a track read through before we dive into any individuals, just to like?
Sure. Yeah, you want I got it. Right. You got it, Shane. You want me to read it?
Yeah, because like we start off with Cochise, and then Show Me How to Live, Gasoline, What You Are, Like a Stone, Set It Off, Shadow on the Sun, I Am the Highway, Exploder, Hypnotize, Bring 'Em Back Alive, Light My Way, Getaway Car, and The Last Remaining Light. I think like it's interesting because like as I mentioned, I listen to a lot of like older music, and it's interesting because I have a lot of my vinyls that I have are older, and like none of them are 65-minute albums.
That's a long album, 13 tracks. Or 14 was it? It's a long album.
Well, you know, to give you perspective, I mean, like, you know, going back and looking at Rick Rubin, you know, because I know some of his stuff from Chili Peppers, Linkin Park. You know, they are pretty long albums. And, you know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic is 17 songs. By the Way is 15 or 16 songs. Stadium Arcadium is a double disc. I think Californication is 15. There are pretty long albums. And I know that I don't know about Audioslave, but what the Chili Peppers do, Chili Peppers write a shitload of songs, and then Rick Rubin comes in and says, "No, that sucks." That's going on. Like, he'll come in and say, like, whether something
single
thing, right? So
there were a bunch of songs that could have been singles on this record, though.
Totally, yeah, absolutely. But can I delve into, like, favorite track, or, is that okay? Or okay. So my favorite track is Shadow on the Sun. Okay. There's no mystery. And one mystery that, and I was, I kind of knew that wasn't going to change. So that's still my favorite track. And it's just because, oh my God, everything. I think the whole band is just fantastic on that song. And it's funny because I remember, Jim, when I spoke with you about it, you mentioned the breakdown being like this crazy. I didn't like the breakdown first time.
I love it so much, too.
I know you do.
So much.
I like it now, but the first time I heard it, I wasn't ready for it because it's so different from the rest of the song. And breakdowns became just this giant thing in the early to mid 2000s. Like, it was just everything. Like, you always, like, Limp Bizkit always had to have a breakdown, and breakdown city. But I just love the way, give Tom Morello credit. I love that solo, that he does. And then when Chris Cornell coming out of it, it's almost like he's just standing by himself there, and he does that third verse, and then he sings at a higher pitch, and it just brings up the intensity so much getting into the end of that third verse. And it's just like outpouring of emotion and pain. I think that's like the whole album. There's an incredible amount of pain, but in that one, it's just like catharsis there, and sadness, but certainly a catharsis. So that's just my favorite track. So I'll let you chew. I have more to say for other tracks, but I'll let you chew on that or comment on that and tell me what your favorite track is.
Yeah, I mean, that song, the darkness in that song just kind of speaks to me for some reason. The lyrics, they're escaping me at the moment, but the gist of it is, like, is he not saying that he's the shadow on somebody else's sun? Like, is he not saying that he's bad for somebody else? Kind of like Hurt. Took me a minute to come up with the lyrics of Hurt. He's saying, like, I will let you down. Like, yeah. I'm gonna hurt you if you let me into your life. That was the kind of pain. Trent Reznor, Hurt, 9 Inch Nails, covered by Johnny Cash. It's a big thing, right?
Right.
It's Johnny Cash's song now.
It's kind of his song now. Yeah.
Even Trent Reznor's like,
in the greater ethos, you're correct.
Yeah.
You're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's a powerful kind of a thing to communicate, like the admission that you're no good is like, that's a tough thing to say, to anybody. But musically, yeah, that breakdown just, I like the visual, Alex. To me, it was like, it's like the floor gets picked up and then thrown back down again in that last like 30 seconds of the song or whatever.
It really is. I mean, it is truly, it floors me. And I don't know exactly what these lyrics are about. When you look it up on Genius, there's no link to any of the lyrics. I look at Genius sometimes just for interpretation. There's no link when I look it up. But I do think this song and other songs on the album, especially songs like, I Am the Highway, it sounds like there was this toxic relationship, and this, whoever this was, whether it was a parent or a lover, it was just a burden. It was just an incredible burden. And it used him up. It just used him up and used him again. And he's like, on I Am the Highway, it sounds like at least that's how I interpret it. He's creating some distance from it, and he's getting some liberation. I am not your rolling wheel. I am the highway. I'm not your carpet ride. On this song, he's like, I will, once upon a time, I was of the mind to lay your burden down. I can't help but feel like it's also a relationship with drugs. Like you look at a lot of the imagery here, there's a lot of like stuff related to just whatever that is, that toxicity. It's got really had his hooks in him. And, I feel like in this song, it seemed like there was something a little bit, I can tell you why people go insane, and I can tell you why you could do the same. It sounds like he's starting to like get some distance from it and be able to see it a little bit more from a bird's eye view, and say, hey, like, you could be just like me. You could be just as fucked up, like that's where I see it kind of going. And I thought that's one of the reasons why a song is so relatable. I've never done drugs. Well, except for the thing that I'm drinking right now, a beer, but for the most part, but I know what it feels like to go over the edge, and I know what it feels like to have a burdensome relationship and feel like I'm on the edge of insanity. so like that's just so it there is a little bit of a hand reaching out to me on this song too.
I've been thinking over the track list. I wanted to pick a different favorite. Excuse me. I wanted to pick a different favorite, but at this point, I think Shadow on the Sun is still my favorite track on the record.
Yeah.
Although I still can listen to Cochise and enjoy it, which is like can't be said for a lot of things. On this record, Like a Stone and I'm the Highway, I've heard so many times. I don't know if they're more popular. Like I don't have any numbers or anything to back this up.
I think Like a Stone is probably the most played track from this album. It seems like, and was definitely one of the main singles from the album. Because like, if I think like any time on the radio, most of the time they throw on a random Audioslave song, it's Like a Stone. And this is from somebody who doesn't listen to Audioslave a whole lot. And just like, it's like somebody told me what's the most popular Audioslave song, it's like, it's Like a Stone. Because it's on the radio all the time.
Definitely the most played. And, I wanted to say, and I want to hear your favorite track in a second, Shane. But before I get to that, Like a Stone, like I said, I was just like, kind of tired of it, kind of skip over it. Got to the point where I would just skip over it, But in context with the rest of the album, what I'm about to say here is like, and I think Rick Rubin would appreciate this, not that he cares about what I say, but you take out Like a Stone in context with the rest of the album falls. Even Shadow on the Sun, as much as I love that song, to me, Like a Stone is so important for this record, because when you look at the lyrics, you look at what's being expressed, the simplicity of it, it raises the rest of the record. Now that you kind of, you hear the lyrics and you hear what he's saying, and to me, it really makes the rest of the record better, that song. Whereas before it was just like, oh man, I'm done with this. I've heard this 1,000 times, but I actually appreciate the song and like the song more. It's kind of the same way I feel about Free Fallin' on Full Moon Fever. Like I love Free Fall. I used to hate that song, but now it's like a portal to a whole world that album has for Tom Petty. So that's all I wanted to say specifically about Like a Star. I feel like it's that important to the album.
I have 2 points before I get into actually talking about my favorite song from this album. One of them is building off of that. I think it's so interesting listening to albums versus listening to just like a random collection of songs. Because like one song could maybe not really stick out on its own, but like it really fits in a whole album of music. And like that's the thing, it's like one of my, I'm sure we'll wind up talking about this album at some point, but like Moving Pictures from Rush, it's like you have 7 tracks on that album. 3 of them, probably most people can't name them. But like when you listen to all 7 of them together, it's like this is just like wall to wall amazing music. But like they don't like capture that like single. Like they're not Tom Sawyer, and they're not Limelight and Red Barchetta and YYZ. It's like, but they all fit really, really well together. And I think that was cool because like I always just used to have greatest hits CDs. So like it was always just like the best of like a band and stuff like that. But like I definitely moved more towards like actually trying to get all the albums of a band and like really listening to the albums. Cause like I think the first band that I had all their albums was Rush. I had all 20 of them. I'd love to have all 20 of them on vinyl working on it. But the thing is, it's like, it's so interesting being able to listen to a whole album together, especially when it all flows together thematically. And some of them are more than just thematically, it's like a whole concept album together. But like the other point that I was going to bring up, and I figured like I'd talk about this a little bit since this is the first time talking about like music solely on one of my shows, is like, I've always been somebody that always listens to the music more than like the lyrics and stuff like that. And like the music always connected with me more. And it's funny because it's like, people will be like, what's he saying? I'm like, I don't know, but it sounds good. It's like, because like there's certain singers, like you can't understand everything they're saying. Like
he's the one who likes all our pretty songs, and he likes to shoot his gun, but he don't know what it means.
It's like I love Creedence. Can you decipher half the shit that John Fogerty sings? Probably not. But you know, I actually know all the lyrics to Down on the Corner though. Definitely didn't when I was younger.
Sure.
That like Popo and stuff like that. It's like, no, it's Willie and the Poor Boys, bring a nickel, tap your feet. So it's like, oh, that's what that says. But the thing is, it's like, and I love AC/DC, and even Brian Johnson's like, I'm another instrument in the band.
Right.
I'm not like a vocalist.
Exactly.
Like, because like nobody's going to argue that Brian Johnson has the best voice. But it sounds perfect for AC/DC. They all play their parts.
Yeah.
They all lay it down for Angus to go nuts. That's basically what they're doing. But
they
like
have their own sound.
Yeah, but getting back to this specifically, I think the song that stuck out to me the most, and like I actually I was at Pep Boys for 3 hours this morning getting the brakes replaced on my back tires. I was sitting going through like the lyrics of all the songs on this album because like I didn't want to come in just like, I think this one sounded really cool. But like, I think the song that sticks out to me the most is Show Me How to Live. Because like this is definitely one of the ones that I've heard a few times on like the radio and stuff like that. And like I know like exactly how like the chorus goes with like what he's saying, like show me how to live. And I was looking at the lyrics and like some of this like really sticks out to me because like I looked it up and like it's supposed to be talking about like it's a rendition of Frankenstein and stuff like that. Because like built with stolen parts, a telephone in my heart. Someone get me a priest to put my mind to bed. This ringing in my head, is this a curse or is this a disease? And like the chorus of the song's like, nail in my hand from my creator, give me life, now show me how to live. And like when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. That it's like it's the like creator and creation kind of story. And just like, did I ask for this? Did I ask to be brought into this life and have to live through all this stuff? It's like, no, you're just born, you're created. And I think that's really interesting because it's like, there's a lot of suffering in life. Would people choose to live through all of that if they didn't have to? And I think that's a very deep perspective to potentially have, and unfortunate kind of thinking about how things turned out for Chris Cornell and everything. But like, I think this is a really interesting song. Like, I love the music too. Like, it's a banger. That's the thing. I'm listening to this album, like half this album, just like, damn,
bangers,
like right off the start. And it has something interesting to say too. And I think it's cool when you could adapt, especially with music, like adapt other media and like turn it into something. Like Led Zeppelin did that a lot, because like they adapted a lot of Lord of the Rings, like Middle Earth lore and stuff like that, into songs. Rush does it a little bit. Like, actually, Rush does it a lot. Neil Peart was a nerd. Because like they have a whole entire song called Rivendell. And then you have like 2112 is literally based off of The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And
right.
Like those kinds of things, I always find that interesting. And because like trying to turn like a whole entire book into a song, and like morphing that whole entire like hundreds of pages into like, this is just like how many lyrics, but like really being able to capture the essence of what it's trying to say. And I feel like the song really does capture that struggle. It's like Adam, the creation, didn't ask for this. And like, is this really a curse? Is this a disease? Or it's like, did he really cure him, bringing him back to life? It's just like, did he though? And all the suffering that no matter where that creation is going to live, it's going to be a lot of suffering because nobody's going to accept it, kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that's why that song really stuck out to me.
Right on, man. I'd totally forgotten that "Nail in My Hand" was the line there, and I didn't know that for a long time, because I'm like you, Shane. I listen to the music, I listen to the sound of Chris Cornell's voice. I'm not usually thinking about what he's saying, you know, in the moment.
And to be fair, in the early 90s, I think it was a lot of vowel sounds that singers were singing.
I blame Eddie Vedder. Yeah.
Oh, a lot of horse sounds. A lot of horse whinny.
Yeah, a lot of horse sounds. If I could just say a few things about Cornell, I don't know how dark we want to get here today, but I kind of look at it the way I look at Bourdain's life. Like, both of them lived to a pretty ripe age. They lived a really full life, you know, respectively, each to his own.
Sure.
Several projects, a whole bunch of albums. Both of them got married. They had kids. Like, the fact that they made it as far and as long as they did, with assuming he's saying life, he's talking about life in that song and not depression. Okay. Making it as far as they did and accomplishing as much as they did, I kind of see it as a win. So like, to me, it's not really sad to hear him sing about it, but it's more like a triumph that he's dealing with this on a daily basis and making this awesome music out of it, and for so long, you know. Sure. But one thing I heard him say this in an interview somewhere, like his music, he wasn't of the mind that you should get what he's trying to say. Like, he's giving it to you, and whatever you get out of the music is yours. And that was his philosophy about I don't know, just about lyrics, because that is his contribution to the song, but like that's his kind of philosophy about his music. So I think it's cool that, you know, whatever it means to you is yours, and I think it's cool that he you know, would bless it in that way. But yeah, I'd forgotten that the lead into that chorus was like a Jesus reference.
Yeah. To be perfectly honest, I probably couldn't have told you what the first two lines of the chorus were, but I could tell you the other two. Because that's one of the things, like, so many songs, like, you have that like pull away thing, that like that just that section of it that just pops in your head right away. And for me, it was like the way that he like sings and "Show Me How to Live." It just like really like hammers home that chorus at that moment. And because now I might be getting things mixed up because he's the one. This is the song where he does his like strange like vocalization towards the end of the song. The strange like gurgling, which apparently he was doing like slapping on the side of his throat.
Oh, that's cool. I always figured it was just a digital effect. But yeah, you're right. The way the song fades out.
Yep.
His voice is like sliding between notes. So you're saying he was actually hitting himself in the throat?
According to the internet, and the internet never lies to me. Because it was like the
yeah, kind of Middle Eastern ululating kind of a sound out of that song. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I also think it's kind of funny that like the music video for the song, for example, is completely, it has nothing to do with anything under the surface. They're all cruising around in a really cool car, classic 70s car.
From Vanishing Point.
From Vanishing Point, 1971's really? Vanishing Point, which is
wow.
also where they got the name of the band, apparently. Some fun trivia there.
Interesting.
But none of that Frankenstein existential stuff is in the video like anywhere. So,
and I would have never even thought about that, but now you bring it up, like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously I saw a biblical, reference there, but not in the creator nail. On Apple Music, it says nail in my head, not my hand, but hand is far more Christ-like, obviously.
I choose to go with that one. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe something was misinterpreted by Apple, but yeah, no.
I just think the professionals can't even get it right either.
Yeah. I just like it's definitely a banger. In fact, the kids at the older kids at School of Rock were covering this one. They sounded really good doing it. I kept thinking about their cover of it. But yeah, even the bangers on this album have pain, underneath it. I usually don't. Go ahead, Shane.
I was about to read this one other section from the song in terms of lyrics, and in the afterbirth on the quiet earth, let the stains remind you, you thought you made a man, you better think again before my role defines you. And like, that a little dark to me.
Yeah, it's definitely.
That sounds like a threat.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know.
Well, because if you think about it, like thinking about it from the Frankenstein perspective, like the creations, like you thought that you just brought back a man. This is not what it is, and and he definitely doesn't want to live as a man because, like, obviously, man hates him,
right,
and wants to destroy him, and it's so interesting because, like, probably most people have had their experience with like the Frankenstein story from like the 30s, like Universal horror movies, where it's like just Boris Karloff was like, and like how weird of a casting it is. I do respect Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because like Robert De Niro is the Frankenstein creation.
That's weird.
And it's like
I didn't see that one. Is he more kind of relatable, more closer to the character from the book? Maybe
his look is grotesque, but he's intelligent. He could speak from the start. He knows that he's an amalgamation, and it's a lot more like the actual book where he's there to try to torture Frankenstein for like what he did and wanting to have like an actual life and not being able to because like just look at him, he's a reanimated corpse,
right?
And like it's like Robert De Niro is an amazing actor, very odd choice though, and you're just like, you think so, Frankenstein?
He's like, it's not my fault my face looks this way, it's his fault,
Right. Right. So why would you get, it makes me think, not that, why would you give me this vessel if, I can't exist, fully in it, why would you make me a fish if or if I can't swim in the ocean, why would you, yeah, no, that's different. That's different.
That's great. Should we jump over to, since we're doing some lyrical analysis, should we look into Like a Stone while we're looking at lyrics?
I think that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Pull it up.
I do want to talk about deep cuts eventually, but yes, that's important.
Although I'm having some trouble narrowing down my deep cut, but I'll do my best, Alex.
On a cobweb afternoon, in a room full of emptiness, by a freeway I confess, I was lost in the pages of a book full of death, reading how we'll die alone, and if we're good, we'll lay to rest anywhere we want to go. Because those are the opening lyrics of Like a Stone.
Yeah, it's obviously, yeah, there's just so much longing in this song.
Does he want to die, or is he just resigned to death? I don't think I really have a definitive answer to that. Is he stuck somewhere waiting to die because he has no other choice, or is he choosing to sit here, wait for death because he's just done with it all? I'm not quite sure.
I'm not hearing a resignment. I'm not hearing him resigning to it necessarily. I'm feeling from the lyrics that he's being summoned to this thing. That's what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling a sort of, I wasn't going to say depression. That's not the word I'm looking for. But I'm
but certainly melancholy. There's some kind of melancholiness going on. Yeah.
Well, and I think that really fits with the tone of the song too, because it's like that, the brew, and it's just a lot flatter in terms of tone than some of the other songs leading up to it on the album. And I think that's one of the things that really makes it stand out, because especially on an album that has 14 songs on it, I think there's probably going to at least be a handful of them that kind of sound well, that's just the sound of the album. And it's just I remember when, I think the first AC/DC album that came out when I was buying CDs was Black Ice. And there's good 6 songs on there that I love. And there's 16 songs on the album, and there's just 10 of them that literally sound like the same exact song, with just different lyrics. And then it's just you could have just made a shorter album and cut out all the fat, but
yeah.
But obviously you have all the songs that are really identifiable, and this is definitely probably the most.
Yeah, he's definitely, I really feel that he's definitely reaching for something. The sadness is there, and the pain is still in there, but it feels like he's reaching for something. So I feel like he's reaching for something that's healing in this. I really feel like he's reaching for something that's healing here, and I don't know if it's wrong to assume that it's a 12-step sort of thing, where he's searching for a higher power, but I'm definitely feeling, he's done something wrong. He mentions that in the lyrics, regretting the things that he's done wrong, but he's talking about angels and death, and he's talking about, so it feels like he's trying to make peace.
Well, I love the lines here where it's and on my deathbed, I will pray to the gods and to the angels, like a pagan to anyone who will take me to heaven. So it feels like that kind of desperation of just trying to find something. for salvation.
Yeah, desperation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And
Would you mind reading some from the bridge too, Shane? Go ahead, keep going if you were going to, but I only have one screen today, which was an oversight or an undersight.
That's a good
but
thing.
I'd like to talk about the bridge too, if possible.
Well, let's read the chorus. We might as well read the chorus, right? You know,
I will wait for you there like a stone.
Yeah. Oh, no, wait, hold on. You could be before that. You got to go back, right? You know, in your house, I long to be. You know. Oh, sorry. Apple just screwed me up.
Rung by rung up the ladder, right? Patiently. Is that the next line?
I saw in your house, I long to be room by room, patiently.
Oh, room by room. Oh, okay.
I'll wait for you there like a stone. I'll wait for you there alone.
I do remember when I used to,
probably
like the first few times I heard the song, probably on the radio, I thought he was singing to like friends of his who had gone before him. And at this point, I feel like he's talking directly to death, but I don't know if you guys disagree, please.
Interesting. Yeah. Who is he talking to? Anybody specifically? Yeah, to death itself. Oh, wow, that's dark.
Because it kind of seems like he's just trying to talk to anybody who's going to bring him peace.
Right.
And I think it's so like the two lines that I find so interesting because like it sets up like on the death that I pray to the gods and to the angels, like this is a very specific kind of prayer. But then like the next two lines, it's like a pagan to anyone. At that point, it's just like, I'm gonna, pray to anybody find me. And as it turns out, like he's gonna be waiting there like a stone alone, waiting for that salvation to come.
I never thought of this song like a prayer before, but that's really cool. That's a really cool way to look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. And for the bridge, Jim, you're looking at, and I sat in regret of all the things that I've done, for all that I've blessed and all that I've wronged. In dreams until my death, I will wander on.
Oh, okay. Shane kind of already touched on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay.
so that, that really does feel like a prayer. That's so.
But it's just kind of shouted out there, right? It's not directed to anybody or anything in particular. It's just.
Yeah, I think death it makes a lot of sense for interpretation. But it could be as simple as God. It could be as simple as peace, relief. Yeah. So, but it's beautiful. And if you look at it like a prayer, that's why I think it's so important to the rest of the album. Because he really is reaching for that. So it's just, it's beautiful. And that bridge, by the way, is viewed as like an acoustic guitar. It comes in there, I think, which is very different for Tom Morello. It's just
as short as it is. Yeah, it's definitely an acoustic guitar. And it does, like Shane was saying, it does provide kind of a tonal break from the intense, the bangers,
right,
in your face stuff. But that's really my favorite stuff.
But it also provides like a bit of a valley to add on what you're saying, so that you can have shadow on the sun, so that it's shadow on the sun doesn't feel like, but where the hell this come from? Like it really, it shows how deep they can go, and not just be, Jimmy Page meets Tom Morello or whatever, however you want to critique that, So that's a special song.
So speaking of the album as a whole, Alex, I know, did you have one song in particular as a deep cut, or did you have more than one in mind?
Yeah, well, really, honestly, it's just the last two. I think, is it called Getaway Car?
Yep.
It's called Getaway Car. I like songs about getaway cars. I really dig that one, actually. And
it's kind of a slow jam, right?
It is.
Get yourself a car.
Yeah, it is. And there's this kind of the pain is still, he still weaves it in there, but there's also this kind of like, like almost there's this blues, there's almost a bluesy section too, where it's like, it's just me and my car, it's very like solo man on the road, and then I like Last Remaining Light because I always tend to like the last songs on some bands' albums because I feel like it simultaneously, it feels like they were able to break away a little bit from the formula of the rest of the album, and it gives you kind of a window into what they might be able to do next. So I kind of like, I've always had that thing. That's always what I loved about the last songs on Chili Pepper records, and in particular, really Rick Rubin records. Actually, he, the last track tends to kind of derive away from the rest of the album enough to give you your ear something different. And I kind of dig that. I really dig that.
Sell the next album.
Yeah.
It does remind me, and I don't think Rick Rubin ever produced live, but it reminds me a little bit of Secret Samadhi and Throwing Copper from live, which was like probably my favorite band of my teenage years before Audioslave came along. The last song on those albums are, I think they're both pretty slow. One has like a slide guitar and kind of a country feel to it, and the other one's completely acoustic, I think.
Oh, cool.
So as far as albums that I like, there's definitely a pattern there. Should I go next for deep cut? I can't decide really. Gasoline to me is kind of a deep cut. Exploder, Set It Off, and there's another one those are all very, very similar in tone.
Sure, totally. Yeah.
But they're all such cool riffs, and they all rock out really hard. So like when I was tired of the Cochise and the Show Me How to Live, those were the songs that I would rock out to. I don't think I can choose a favorite out of those, but the fact that there's, I think only like the song before Getaway Car, maybe I would like skip that one. And like the slow songs, I might skip them because I'm trying to like really, get my energy up and rock out. But as a collection, I think it's a really strong album. To me, it seems very West Coast. Now that I've seen a couple of the videos, it's apparent to me how much like car culture is in the album between the Gasoline and Getaway Car and the video to Show Me How to Live and I Am the Highway. There's a lot of kind of desert and asphalt and cool car kind of culture woven in, which is kind of cool. That it gives it a sense of place in my head. There's like a physical place for that to actually exist.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously, By a Freeway, in Like a Stone. So, there's so much music comes out of that, West Coast region. Not all of it does, but so much does. And they came, I guess they came out of Glendale, or they decided to get together in Glendale, or at least that's what the internet says. Chris Cornell came out of Seattle, but everybody goes down Southern California. And yeah, I feel a little bit of desert rock, through, scattered throughout the album, certainly, so a lot of the delay, on, Tom Morello's. I think he incorporates that beautifully, in some of his guitar solos. But yeah, no, I think it's for me, it's a super strong album. There's a lot of really good stuff here. I do think that the bangers, I think my ears get a little exhausted on the bangers by the end of the record, by like track 10. I'm like, okay, then we're not really going to break any real new ground. That's why I like Getaway Car, because it was more in the chill, like vibe outside. but that's just me.
I definitely like the song Gasoline too, because like that was definitely one that stuck out to me. And it's interesting because it's like I saw comparisons to like Led Zeppelin, like this has that specific kind of like classic rock sound, but it's not like Greta Van Fleet like sound like Led Zeppelin, where it's just like I legitimately the first time I heard Highway Tune, I'm like, how have I never heard this Led Zeppelin song before? And then I found out, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't actually Led Zeppelin.
Right.
Can they just get away with just trying to be Led Zeppelin in the 2000s? It was the Ford v Ferrari trailer. I heard Highway Tune for the first time. I'm like, wait a minute. This is some great Led Zeppelin they have in here. I don't think I've heard this song before. I look up like, who the hell's Greta Van Fleet?
Well, part of that, man, I think is the record industry forgot how to and does not actively try to create new rock stars. And so when you don't have, I mean, there's rock bands out there, there's indie rock bands and music scenes. They're certainly out there, and they're mixing genres. So the music scenes I've been in, what I'm seeing is they're mixing genres, and so but because you don't have a whole lot of record company support, and you don't have a whole lot of commercial support pushing these different sounds and sites from these different artists, we've been caught in a bit of a vacuum, and so a band like Greta Van Fleet coming out and saying, well, we're just going to be the best, we're going to be our version of Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, as best as we can be. And, and that was their answer to being able to have a mainstream band. I mean, obviously those guys are incredibly talented, but no one has a lot of people don't respect them because they don't feel like they're original. But it was a lot easier to sell them because of the way they sound, and even John Frusciante from the Chili Peppers said, it's been a while since somebody's done anything really unique with a guitar. That's not altogether true, but it's been a while since somebody's been able to do it in a commercially successful, big, grandiose Beatles on Ed Sullivan sort of way, and part of that's because of the internet. Part of that's because of the way that we absorb music. We're talking about an album that came out, almost 20 years ago, so that's why Greta Van Fleet becomes Greta Van Fleet. And going back to what you said in the beginning of the very beginning of the video, that this is a super group, this is partially record company response to, the pop wave of the early 2000s, the bro backwards baseball cap, angry music of the early 2000s. Don't get me wrong, I like break stuff. I'll admit it. That is a great song to listen to when you're angry. But this was a response to, okay, Soundgarden's gone. Kurt Cobain is gone. Like the 90s were over. How do we figure this shit out? We have these great musicians. How do we figure this out so that we can, so Velvet Revolver and Audioslave come out around the same freaking time, and they're both classic rock throwbacks with those 90s / late 80s names, faces that everybody's going to buy tickets, pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see their shows. So that's what this is record company response. And they don't get as big if they don't have the fame that they had in the 90s, and B, have a whole lot of support from these record companies. Rick Rubin doesn't work with an artist if he's not a big rising star with a lot of record company muscle behind it, and B, weird enough so that he can be weird and smoke weed and talk about Tom Petty with him or whatever, in his backyard with his 47 animals or whatever the hell he does. So, that's why Greta Van Fleet is Greta Van Fleet. But that's also why Audioslave is Audioslave. It's still out there. I remember that band, The Darkness, that came up. I don't know a lot about them. They also sounded like, amazing vocals with like 70s pop rock. Like that's
Queen, Led Zeppelin. Yeah, definitely. I hear those things still in the darkness. Yeah.
But they came out in the early 2000s. So that's been the record company response on the rock end for a while. Is just, like outside of like Coldplay, which they get shit for because being Coldplay. Coldplay was actually really fucking good. Like, they were really fucking good albums from Coldplay, but it was like, it just wasn't bro.
Well, and for me, and to give a little perspective on like my taste in music and probably why I haven't really hooked onto as much modern music is because like I did grow up listening to classic rock music and really loving rock music.
Sure.
And like, who plays rock music anymore? And that's why Greta Van Fleet is, like you said, really popular, is because it sounds like Led Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
I love Black Country Communion, which was another super group, because it was Joe Bonamassa, who's like this amazing blues guitarist who's been playing since he was like 10 years old, opening for B.B. King. Glenn Hughes on bass and vocals, who had been in Deep Purple at one point, had been in Black Sabbath at one point. Derek Sheranian on keyboards from Dream Theater, and Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, on drums.
Right.
And Black Country Communion has like 3 or 4 albums, and they sound like classic rock music. Mm-hmm. And like, I loved it for it. And it's like, they did sound like Glenn Hughes has a very distinct voice, and Joe Bonamassa has a very distinct voice. So like, they kind of have their own sound in that way, but a lot of the music sounds like something like Led Zeppelin would make. But like, there's not a whole lot of like straightforward rock music, because like, I know you brought Coldplay, and then you have Nickelback,
sure,
who's like, that's rock music. And
feels very radio friendly, gets a lot of hate. I try not to hate on anybody now. I do my best not to, like I used to hate Good Charlotte, like that song Going Down, Down, da 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 da. Like I hate his voice on that song. But
I believe that was
oh, that's Fall Out Boy.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry. That's fine. I still hate the way he sings the opening line, but the lyrics are amazing. And but I try not to hate anything, because you can kind of find value in anything that gets kind of put out there into the ether, but,
Well, and I feel like what has really defined what rock music is like alternative music. Yes. And that's what most of it is now. And like, that's why I still like latch on to like, I love Black Keys, which started like blues, their first couple albums, and have gotten a lot more like straightforward kind of bluesy rock kind of sound to it over the years, with some different albums that try out some different things. I'm a huge fan of Hailstorm, because it's like, that's just some good classic hard rock music.
Okay.
And I'll be seeing them again in July. Will be my second time seeing them in concert.
I never listened to them.
They're playing with the Pretty Reckless.
Yeah. Well, that's all great. And I mean, and that's why I start these conversations with some cynicism, but I usually end them with a little bit of optimism, because I hear these band names being thrown out. They're still playing live. They're still going out and doing stuff. Do you listen to Volbeat at all?
I enjoy Volbeat.
Yeah, my kids on Thursday, they're doing one of their songs, and I'm like, it's a badass song.
The Warrior, I think, is the coolest song. And like, I'm a huge fan of Disturbed. Their most recent album, like, could be like,
I know, but like, I don't. Yeah, like, it's just been a while since I listened to Disturbed. So.
But like, that's the thing. It's like, and like, I'm a fan of Black Label Society. I feel like they've kind of reached their moment of like, I'm just gonna make a whole album with songs that all sound the same and just be like, oh. But like they had a good 9 albums leading up to that were some bangers. But like the interesting is most of those bands that I just mentioned are all metal and heavy rock, like hard rock music.
Right.
Because like there's no like Tom Petty's out there. I don't feel like, or like
there are people who are trying. There are people who are even trying. Jim, you sent me a link to a dude who sounded a lot like Petty, recent.
Oh yeah, I think that was a knockoff though. I do think there's something specific to the rock genre. Like people wanted a savior in rock. So like when did the rock is dead thing start? Does that go all the way back to the 80s? Like rock was dead and punk happened. And then rock was still dead and we got like hair metal and grunge. And now we think of all that as rock music, don't we? Like
yes. What's it? The Bowling for Soup's 1986. When did Motley Crue become classic rock?
I still don't accept Motley Crue as classic rock, but
me neither.
Royal Blood. You guys are familiar with Royal Blood, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Royal Blood is a duo. It's
good
drums
example.
And bass. And people were so hungry for rock music that they went straight up to opening for Foo Fighters, I think, on the strength of one
Foo Fighters.
One EP.
So,
but again, all those bands you're mentioning they've been around for 15, 20 years, right? Maybe more.
Foo Fighters has definitely been around a while at this point.
Totally. And I mean, and the Foo Fighters get the bill of everyone looks at them like the last surviving rock band, God rest the Taylor Hawkins soul. But they had that kind of for 25 years, the last surviving rock band in the world, the Foo Fighters, but that wasn't true. You guys are bringing up all these band names. There are obviously people out there doing it. It's just, you just can't. I don't know. I struggled with it as a local musician. Like I couldn't say I'm in a rock band. Like I couldn't say that. I felt like, man, I feel like such a dweeb saying that. Like I had to have like some explanation, like I'm in an alternative funk rock band, and I always felt like that doesn't sound right either. I just wanted to say, hey, I'm a songwriter and I have a band and we play songs. Like it's all I wanted to say, but it felt like I had to be categorized. But like, Royal Blood as an example, like they're heavy. Like, it's not I wouldn't call them metal. But are they rock? Yeah, they're definitely. It's alternative rock.
Yeah, call it hard rock. Yeah,
hard.
But I don't know that. Like, would you want an onslaught of rock music? Like Zeppelin is my favorite band. They'll probably always be my favorite band. Right. But, and I wish I could remember who said this, but they were like Led Zeppelin inspired. What did they say? They inspired the shittiest bands that you've ever seen because they wanted to be Led Zeppelin.
Sure. Well, I think that's the thing that when I hear my parents and people talk about that time in the 60s and 70s, it was an eclectic group of bands, and Elton John and Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen and Led Zeppelin. And the Beatles, and what the Beatles broke off into individually, and then CCR and like all these other groups that were around doing.
And that's a lot of variety in just rock music.
Just rock music, right? I mean, like, Simon and Garfunkel, I would say it's folk, but something's gonna find its way into people's ears and be like, oh, is that time? I don't know. I think that I really do. I think the technology, and I think that the recording technology and the way we listen to music really just, everything just got so messy, so many people doing it. And so there's this nostalgia, like we're looking back at this time as these bands were so eclectic and great. And now we look forward as like, these bands are all like, they they're heavy, they're heavier, and they're heaviest, like that's what the 2000s kind of brought on. Heavy, everything had to be heavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
really,
it's because like rock music's either like almost or full-blown metal music or alternative music. And like I listen to if you listen to 104.5 out of Philly, it all sounds like the same goddamn stuff.
Yeah, I don't think you can rely on the radio to give you new music anymore.
Well, and it's funny because it all sounds like the same stuff, and then like every 15 songs or 20 songs will get a Chili Pepper song. And it's just like bam. That's 104.5 in a nutshell.
Chili Peppers are so different.
They do sound so different compared to like, it's a thing where it's like, so Jess, my fiance, for those listening who haven't heard me talk about her, she loves Tame Impala. And like, I've been to a Tame Impala concert. I do enjoy his music.
Sure.
And like, not gonna lie, my favorite song of his is Elephant, which sounds like straight up like John Lennon singing with some like really like heavy thumping beats to it. But like a lot of it is very electronic and stuff like that. And everybody's turned that way. It's like you have bands like the Decemberists and Mumford and Sons turning into that. And I'm like, you were unique. Like
right. Yeah.
Mumford and Sons was Mumford and Sons. And now it sounds like they just do electronic alternative music. Now it's just like, well, what happened?
Right. Dance-oriented music, electronic music, club music, I mean, there are these DJs all over the world who are, making just sick money, just going up there, doing DJ shows with the lights and everything, I mean, that's like, I would think the guys I've been playing with in Brooklyn, who I barely play with them now, but when I do, a lot of the emphasis was on, let's try to sound more like that. And like, I do my best to try and vibe with that and groove in with that. It still sounds like alternative rock to me, but like that's why those bands went that way, is because, that's like, okay, well, this is where music is going, and we're trying to go in that direction. Is it selling out on their part? Not necessarily. Maybe they're just trying, bands are always just trying to go with the flow of the culture. Where is the culture going?
Maybe they got tired of the guitar though. Like maybe they needed some new sounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
when I ask if you want more rock music, that's what I mean. Like, do you really want to hear more people playing the guitar at you? That's what I'm asking.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that the guitar seems to be essential, in a lot of ways. I mean, you could make the piano the front instrument, but the guitar is always it stems from the guitar.
Which it's funny, and I'll say this more for when we actually, because like eventually we will talk about a Rush album. It will happen. But like, it's funny because I love the movie Fanboys, which is about a bunch of Star Wars fans trying to steal the Phantom Menace. Like sneak into the Skywalker Ranch to watch Phantom Menace, and they get into Dan Fogler's van and they open the music like, this is all Rush. And it's like, where's the variety? He's like, Rush is variety. And because like, really though, if you listen to Rush, it's like you listen to something like their first album did just sound like Led Zeppelin, and people legitimately thought they were Led Zeppelin, and then John Rutsey got replaced, their original drummer, and then Neil Peart came in and just changed things. But my main point is like, you get to something like Hold Your Fire in like the mid to late 80s, and it's all synths, it's all electronica, and very little heavy guitar anymore. And they had to completely shift gears. And then their last album, Clockwork Angels, is a hard rock concept album, steampunk science fiction story.
Crazy.
That's a mouthful. That is a mouthful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Rush is unique in that, and I'm not a huge Rush fan. I like some of what I heard from Rush, but they really were given, and they were allowed, that 2112 was huge. They were given that autonomy. Basically, they were able to punch their own ticket, do whatever the hell they wanted for the rest of their career. I mean, that's, so many bands, even like popular multi-million-dollar bands, wish they could have had that, the balls to do that and still make money and still, provide for their families. Like, it's a dream. I'm sure it wasn't always easy, but it's, artistically, it's a dream.
But I guess at this point, getting back to Audioslave, because like I feel like this all stemmed from the fact that like this was a very specific time, and this band came in at a very specific time. And I guess that's why I really love this album so much. It does bring me back to listening to classic rock music, but I feel like it has enough of its own voice. Well, it still has Chris Cornell's voice that makes it stand out. But I guess, do either of you have some final thoughts wrapping up, talking about Audioslave?
Well, that's, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out how Cochise related to Audioslave at all. But I think you guys we've all been talking about it for the past 10 minutes. I think they were the last rock band in the world. Mm-hmm. Like Cochise was the last undefeated native leader in the West. Okay. I think that's his claim to fame. Or I think he was maybe one of the last native chiefs to die uncaptured. Like they never got him, you know what I mean? So maybe Audioslave is their way of saying like they're not selling out, like they're still playing the same music that they've been playing since they were younger men, and still good, and like maybe that was supposed to be kind of the last bastion for rock. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. That's crazy. There's that's such a big conversation about the last bastion for rock. I mean, we'll always talk about rock music. Whether or not we're talking about new rock music is another story.
We could make a list of bands to tell people to go listen to, like right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. There's so much to that, but I don't have any big last things to say. I did want to say this is much more specific, but I Am the Highway. We didn't talk a whole lot about that song, but I think if you listen to the beginning of, this is more of a Rick Rubinism, slight criticism on Rick Rubin. The beginning of that song, if you listen to the beginning of that song, then you listen to What I've Done by Linkin Park, sound very similar. I don't know if it's the same key or the same note, but like the instrumentation, like the build up sounds very, very similar.
Maybe they wanted to be in a Transformers movie.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they were going for, man. You got to get that money, got to get that Shia LaBeouf, man.
Linkin Park got that Transformers money.
Oh, they did. They
had a new song for every single one of them.
Oh, God rest Chad Bennington and Chris Cornell's soul. But I guess, just listen. If you listen to What I've Done at the very beginning, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's very, very similar intro there. I've listened to, because of being a Chili Pepper fan and, liking some, I've listened to quite a few Rick Rubin, even some of his hip hop stuff like Jay-Z and, the Johnny Cash, he produced Johnny Cash's Hurt. He produced Wildflowers by Tom Petty. Like, this guy's all over the freaking place. He is a great producer. He really is. But he does have, you will definitely hear some commonalities from artist to artist. And, that's just, he is the party. He's the guy pulling the levers back there. Yeah.
Behind the curtain. That's right. Am Oz.
Exactly. Got to get a movie reference in there.
Can't help it. But thank you both for coming on and chatting about Audioslave. I think this was a fun episode because it's like something different. And I would love to do more of these and talking about some albums. I'm sure we'll talk about what one we might want to talk about next after we wrap up. But Alex and Jim, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, man. This was a lot of fun.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.